Well, hello, and welcome to Windward Community College. And this is Out Loud in the Library. So it's our 10th anniversary of program that supports literature and the arts. So thank you for coming and supporting literature and for arts in Hawaii. So I'm Susan Lee St. John. I coordinate the Out Loud in the Library program, which is a collaborative program between the Language Arts Department and the library. So today we have poet Emily Jungmin Yoon, and she'll read from her recently published poetry collection, Find Me as a Creature I Am. After the reading, we're going to have time for question and answers, and then we have a reception upstairs and a book signing. So Emily Jungmin Yoon is a poet, translator, editor, and scholar, known for her poetry collection, A Cruelty Special to Our Species, which was published in 2018, and which won the 2019 Devil's Kitchen Reading Award and was a finalist for the 2020 Kate Tufts Discovery Award. Her work has appeared in major publications like The New Yorker and the New York Times Magazine. Yoon has received fellowships from the Poetry Foundation and Breadloaf's Writers Conference. She holds an MFA from NYU and a PhD from the University of Chicago, and is an assistant professor of East Asian languages and literature at the University of Hawaii at Mānoa. So if you could welcome Emily Jungmin Yoon.
Thank you so much. Hi everyone, is the volume okay? Thank you so much for coming on this rainy morning. Oh my gosh, where's my water? For some poems. I'm going to be reading from my second book, Find Me as a Creature I Am. All my friends who love trees are dead. My grandmother said, and now she is. In the first morning in a world without her, even as we all tuck her into the earth, her children and their children, stepping on the velvet soil, smooth and firm and new and old, all at once, I cannot accept the facts. She had a green thumb. She loved medical shows. How can you see all that blood, all that cutting? I asked. She said I wanted to become a doctor. She wanted to travel the world. She taped the world map on her table, drew a line from Chicago to Busan. In the Field Museum, I stroll among birds of America, life-size paintings of specimen doing what they do, a pair of long-billed curlews standing next to tall grass, a roseate spoonbill twisting toward water. Audubon went through great troubles observing them flying and looking after their young, then somehow killed these birds. Now here I am, observing portraits protected from the blood, the cutting. Taking turns pouring dirt over her coffin, her children comment how she chose the perfect day to go. A warm Saturday with blue skies, too warm, in fact, for January. She is so good at forecasting the weather, my uncle praises. My mother studies the soil clinging to the living left behind, my grandmother's trees. I was able to keep the old yellow tree alive, a face full of new light. The Dracaena marginata had babies, the angel's trumpets are blooming, a mouth full of strange new names. Walking through the field, I see more animals who loved trees, who died to pretend in a taxidermy wing in Chicago. I can't do it today, I text my friend. I'll let her go some other time. Why do you have to let her go? I loved the poetry she enclosed in her early morning text. I loved the one that began, "I had trouble falling asleep." Then she thought of me in that trouble, in that trembling video she took of her kitchen. In the intensive care unit, I am annoyed at how beautiful the nurse is next to my grandmother's swollen hands and feet, at the foundation, curly eyelashes, roseate blush, life painted into display. Then I am ashamed. Her grave is contracted for 50 years, another thing I learned. Where our bodies lie are temporary exhibits. In her dawn poem, my grandmother wrote, "All my friends who love trees are dead." I received her sadness and named it a poem. She loved me. She was tired of living. I wanted to be protected from her death. My mother enters the morgue, the only one of the children to do so. She watches her mother being cleaned and dressed. She observes the blues and greens of a dead body, its cold wings twisting out. She curls out my grandmother's dried lips, then, with her makeup, starts painting her. I should have warned you that a lot of my poems are about grief and death, but they're also about love. In fact, I started writing this manuscript just determined that I'm going to write a book full of love poems. And then a lot of them became about death. But then I realized, how can the two of them not go together? I wonder if you ever loved somebody so much that you imagined them dying and then started crying. And I feel like, it's really just unfathomable sorrow sometimes, but sometimes it's very useful energy that kind of activates a kindness and tenderness toward the person that you're thinking about. So this poem is sort of meditating about that. Love and death speaking at once. We come together. To love someone means to imagine their death. 2 a.m. and you lie awake in fear of us. What if? What if? Call your mother. Say you're sorry. Call your father. What? Call your sister. Memory sustains and fades. Take a picture. Keep a journal. Underline, dog ear, leave margin notes in your book. Mark it with your touch. Do not go into a mountain alone. Write the letter that embarrasses you, adulating, undulating language, each line a petal in a dahlia. Fields of swaying dahlias, you make them. Yes, you can. Give that person a bouquet of dahlias, grown, then cut, for you. That is us, together. We are beautiful, together. If we make in you such tender-hearted anticipation, is it so bad? So I love handwriting letters to my friends and cards. And I love receiving them just because of the physicality of them and the fact that, they held this pen and, pushed it across the page and it came to me, through physical mail. And I think it just captures something much more magical than receiving a text or receiving an email, which, I also really appreciate. But I just love having something to hold from people I love. So I try to do it as much as I can. I have a couple of friends that I always send postcards and cards to, and it's always just so delightful to get something in your mailbox. So much comfort these little objects give us, right? The next poem is called The Greenland Shark, which is, I think, the oldest living marine animal. As far as we know, they can live hundreds of years, which is very shocking, right? I wrote this poem after having read about them. It's kind of from the shark's perspective. The Greenland shark. It made sense. You have to keep living beyond surprise for desire to return. With antiquity returns beauty, she thought. Or rather, longevity is an attraction. Growing long and old on her own, she had survived centuries of names man had given to time, such as what they called the Renaissance, which was a good season for their certain male specimen. She thought she remembered a name or two she was given by men who saw her and left her alone. Because fear, because disgust, mercy, perhaps. Through it all, her heart renewed its languorous beating, so now they want to know. What is your secret? What is your soft body capable of? Her fat liver could oil their killing machines. Her flesh could drive a pack of sled dogs mad. Cannibalism was not beneath her. Wisdom? Please. She asked nothing and asked for none. No, what she wanted was to eat in peace. They want to know how she achieved her age, how they could do the same. This was the final desire her body held. For some of them, anyway. Not these men whose livelihood depended on the same fish she hunted, who acted like they had permission to all life, though they do own these decks on which she lay woven into their nets, listening still, listening to their anger. That it wasn't her. It was not even her that they wanted, her heathered mass that carried her through ancient ice and thaw, and nobody asked her name. The Greenland shark is being studied for just how long they could live, so we could, I guess, apply it to our own bodies. So the biggest predator for the Greenland shark, of course, is are humans, which is true for many animals. But it just feels extra sacrilegious. Oh my gosh, I can't speak. Because some of them lived since, the Renaissance, they lived through so many years that, how can they just be caught in nets? And sometimes not even because of scientists, because, she was hunting the fish and she just gets caught. And that's how a lot of them die. So that's a really heartbreaking fact about them, but I hope you can look Greenland shark up. It's very fascinating. Body of. My mother, teaching me how to protect my body. When a man touches you here, yell, I am a body that will bear a child. How was I, a child, to understand that as the sanctity of my body? How was I to know to say, the body without that potential is also whole and holy? A man who touches a child does not care whether she will one day be fertile. A dear friend, on making the body useful, encourages me to have babies. What does it mean to say, I have my body? I have a brain, I have a life, a heart, I've said before, meaning only mine, without knowing there were outlines of other bodies fleshing in my center, being the body of woman, for whom body means collective, as it is for the body of evidence, of knowledge. Here I present my body of work, my body of water, here my body. But are we of our bodies? Bodies are thrown across oceans, across lands. Bodies lie bleeding through the evidence of bullets. Honest bodies bleeding honestly. In order to continue living, we try to leave evidence of our lives. We accumulate bodies in whatever way we can. Men leave themselves in women's bodies. Friends, I am just now ready to love my own. I love my father's eyebrows on my face, and I love my mother's calves on my legs, and I love the parts of my body that I do not name. Let that be enough. The future of this land is uncertain in how high the flames, the waters will be. This land in which I still bleed. This land in which I give up something every day. So this poem I wrote probably after 2018, which is when my first book came out, or maybe even a year or two before that, but it feels very, very relevant. Especially today. I think a lot about reproductive rights and women's rights and human rights, and it's just very much forefront of my mind today. The next poem is called The Blades. You cut down on the gopher in a single crisp stroke in the garden. In it also, your mother's prized orange tree, a blue jay your family feeds and has trained. I picture the gopher, no longer struggling in the trap, inside the water pipe for the sprinkler, throbbing over grass and stones. Then you must have slid open the door to the dining room, leaned the shovel on the tree. I heard this story years ago in California. In the time of pandemic, alone together, I read too much news. Trump defends using Chinese virus label. Woman assaulted in Manhattan blamed for COVID-19. Racism is a virus. I obsess, knowing our place as Asians in this country, the exemplar minority with advanced degrees and gadgets, a superior meekness. Knowing our desirability was built to reassert Western centrality. That too, a type of technology. To keep us in check, a Texas man took it on himself and stabbed an Asian father and 2 sons, cutting their faces open. One of the children has a gash pointing to his eye, the damage itself in the shape of a blade, a delta, wanting to breach another opening. Watch. Watch the wild turkeys roam the neighborhood, unconcerned, banal, and ugly. Yet, you love these animals. When our friend's old cat died, you had cried. He was 18, had a good, adored life. You had mourned so for someone else's animal. So when your mother told me at the dining table about the gopher, I was shocked. But that too was kindness, your shovel, for the slowly dying animal injured beyond saving, for entering the human world in the shape of a pipe, a wet reach to a diorama of the natural world. Embarrassed and ashamed, you looked away. As we sat, in that moment, 2 Koreans in a white world, I wanted to marry you, to protect the person who loves like no other. Foolish and naive, yes. Every day, someone leans the shovel and knife, real and not, against the gentler thing, after striking another that looks like us, for crawling too close out of the technology they built. Yet today, feeling momentarily safe in our room, I can ask what you did to the gopher. You buried the animal, you say, in the same earth it came from. I think a lot about the term Asian American, and I was thinking a lot about it during the lockdowns, witnessing from afar, the violences against Asian people across the continent. Probably not here, hopefully not here, but across the continent, and there are a lot of articles like, how to show up for the Asian American community, how to build community. But I was just thinking about how, East Asian Americans, face like mine, who have always had representative status in that discourse when we talk about Asian Americans, have benefited so much from kind of a proximity to whiteness. Like I was talking about in the poem with, the advanced degrees and the kind of meekness that are ascribed to East Asians in particular. But I think I hope it was kind of a wake-up call for the Asian American community in that time, in that the narrative can change just like that, right? That all of a sudden, we weren't just, mathematicians and scientists and good servants of the empire, but the carriers of virus. And I wrote that poem thinking about just what community means and how do we build it across just various groups of people. Okay. I'm going to read a couple more poems. Related matters. I look at the ocean like it's goodbye. Somewhere it is touching a land laying prey to fire. My grieving mother brings the forest inside, a green excess. When she repots the trees, it is not unlike changing diapers. But she no longer tends to the small, abject frames of the dying. These days, everything feels like the end. A few days ago, a typhoon shaved glass off buildings. A woman in her 60s bled to death after it cut the window into her arm. The name of the wind, Maisak, means teak tree in Khmer, I learn. The timber retains its aromatic fragrance to a great age, I learn. I am always learning. What is it that I want to know? There is nowhere in this world that I want to live. I look at your face like it's goodbye. There is nowhere to go. I shut my window because what else can I do? Tomorrow's typhoon is called Haishen, meaning sea god in Mandarin. I confess I want to live, but nowhere, but still, with great desperation, I want. What is it that you want? Tell me, is your face the same as mine? Tell me, do we see the same things? Tell me we are the same eyes burning through the night. I want to end on more hopeful, sweet notes. But then I realized my last poem is about the apocalypse. I'm going to read maybe two or three more poems. But this poem is about friendship. And this has a couple lines that I borrowed from my fellow poets' lines, so they're kind of woven into the poem. Gala. One evening the summer sun isn't enough. We, poets from the South and West, in the US sense of the words, and the East in the global sense, walk through a blade of Vermont. In sunglasses, in lace-up boots, in zigzag, in jeans, commenting on a beauty so murderous and magical it emancipated some of us hundreds of years ago, for us to hear, you should feel lucky to be in this country. One of us looks out at the rows of yellow flowers and says, can you imagine arriving at a land like this, thinking, how beautiful, I'm going to take it. Which reminded me of another friend, this time in Paris, looking around its gilded splendor to say, look what empire is capable of. which reminded me of another friend, this one from Paris, looking down at Seoul from a gold observatory to say, "It's kind of ugly." And it felt as if he had said, "I am." One evening of summer in Vermont, we are beauty, in sunglasses and embroidery and flower crown and plaid cocktails, our languages in our hands, delicious and loud. We are at a gala for writers. "What does gala even mean?" one of us asks. To which another one says, "I think it's a kind of party." To which the first one says, "No, motherfucker, I want the etymology." And we flare in laughter. 2 years later, I consult the online etymology dictionary to see gala, noun, 1620s, festive dress or attire, from French en gala, perhaps from Old French gal, merriment, from galer, rejoice, make merry. See gallant. See gallant in our festive red dresses and snapbacks and public merriment and skins, racing through this country on the hayride, some of us standing through the turbulence of it all, touching the buried shrubbery and August dirt, indulging in a gala. See here, party of us, siblings. What did we sing in our hot breath? One evening, we looked up at the sky and I asked about the man-given names of its elements. Is it Andromeda? Is it Venus? None of us knew shit. We asked anyway. One evening, we saw small wings glittering over the same yellow flowers, and knowing there were butterflies in hundreds to repopulate the land, sat astounded. We had only days ourselves to fly back to the South and the Midwest and the West, in the US sense of the words. The summer sun went promptly, fastidious with its red folds over the sky. We lit the candles anyway. We passed the bread. We passed the wine. If the only world is a hell with my siblings, I thought, I should feel lucky to call this world home. Brother, sister, I am here. I walk with you. Evolution. I look for uncomplicated peace in ocean and sand, afraid of the kind of candor you draw from me, my cowardly deep-sea regime. With easy honesty, I make utterances ugly and necessary to my being, a kind of nakedness I never attempted in the privacy of myself. Looking at your back, darkened by the sun, faithfully pouring into the water in front of us, I think desire is the wrong word, and love too plain, devotion too sacred. My whole life, I think, I will use for describing you. What do I know outside of words, which despite their history and combinations are too few and short for this life? I don't know if I want heaven, but I know I want to be where you go, in sand, water, every possible animal form. Okay, just one more poem, and then we'll fly off into whatever you have to fly off into. This poem kind of comes from my actual wedding vow. So, and I want to end with love. Vow. I love you. I don't know how else to begin. How we began, though, was almost as if it were already written. The details of how we arrived at each other to say I love you, even as we fall asleep, to let each other's name be the first sound we utter every morning, can only be a gift of careful construction, a design of an elsewhere where we were already together. Saying nothing, you make me want to live more meaningfully. The world is so wild, beautiful, and terrifying, and everywhere we turn, a new atrocity. Then I close my eyes and picture joy. Among things, there is this day. Among faces, there is yours. And I am no longer afraid. I watch you in your own quiet moments, and I want this life. I want this life to be longer. All I want is more time with you. I love you. This is the only way I know how to end. Thank you.
Well, we have some time for questions and answers. So, do you have a question?
Still thirsty. Yes.
You mentioned that you are a professor of language. What languages do you speak and which ones do you teach?
Oh, so yeah, I'm in the East Asian Languages and Literatures department at UH Mānoa, but I teach Korean literature. So I speak Korean. Korean was my native language. I didn't learn English until I was like 11 or so, but I don't teach the language. Yeah, I teach Korean literature and creative writing at UH. And also I learned Japanese for a few years and Spanish. And so I learned Spanish in high school, thinking it's going to be very, very useful and I'm going to be using it all around. And then I stopped learning it in college and it like kind of disappeared. And I went to Mexico City right before the lockdowns. And people were like, oh, if you learned it once, it'll all like come back. It'll all come rushing back. And it was like, au contraire, it kind of like receded because people were speaking so quickly and I was so shy that I couldn't utter a single word of Spanish. So if you're learning a language right now, keep at it. You'll regret it when it disappears from your mind. Yes?
I imagine at UH you find a lot of community when it comes to gathering a lot of different poets and creative writers. Do you know of any places where other poets and creative writers congregate outside of UH?
On the island? Yeah, actually one thing I really miss about Chicago and other cities I lived in on the continent is the independent bookstores. I feel like on the continent that's where a lot of readings happen, a lot of writers kind of go through these towns and speak at indie bookstores on their book tours. And here unfortunately I found that there aren't a lot of independent bookstores, but I go to the shop a lot in Kaimuki. I read there last weekend and they have a lot of readings, I think like several times a month, a lot of local writers as well as some people who come in from other places on the continent. So I recommend that you join their newsletter and you'll get updates from them. Yeah.
Oh, what was it called?
The Shop.
How do you spell it?
Also D-A and then shop.
No,
Yeah, The Shop.
Okay.
It's really cute.
I do know of one other one. It's at Hawaiian Brian's, they have slam poetry once a month.
Mm-hmm.
So I just mentioned it.
Hawaiian Brian's. Thank you, I didn't know that. So if you love slam poetry, that's the place to go, it sounds like. Yeah.
I was going to ask, what was like the first time you started writing
Yeah, I think I've been a poet all my life in the sense that I always loved writing. The first poem I can remember writing, I don't know if this was my first poem ever, but I wrote a poem maybe at like 5 years of age, and it was about goldfish, like goldfish waving to each other with their tails. So I always loved writing little poems and stories. But I guess when I became serious about poetry out of all the genres was in high school. I took a creative writing class in high school, and the teacher was a poet. So even though we wrote across multiple genres, his enthusiasm for poetry was so infectious that it made me jump over to the dark side and just commit to poetry. And I still thank him in all my books. I think I've named him here. So he was just a major influence on me on choosing poetry, or rather, let poetry choose me in a sense. Yeah.
Languages help us to see the world in different ways. It gives us different lenses. And I'm wondering if you find that true writing in different languages, if it affects the kind of poetry that you end up with.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if you know another language, like a whole different world opens up, like a whole different way of describing the world opens up, which then in turn affects the way you treat the people and the objects in it, right? And, like I mentioned, I didn't really speak English until I was about 11. I immigrated to Canada when I was almost 11. And so I had to self-translate a lot, or I also had to translate for like my mother at times too. And it felt like, it felt torturous back then, and have kids like make fun of me for my pronunciation or whatnot. But as I grew older, I realized that the kind of gap between languages is where poetry really lives. The process of translation, some of the things that seem kind of impossible to translate, for example, if like a word doesn't exist in Korean or English, just trying to bridge that gap through description, that itself can become poetry. So now I'm really grateful to be bilingual, and also, of course, it lets me read poems in English and in Korean, right? So I have just like a range of texts that can inspire me, kind of jolt my language into to the poetic realm. I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah, thank you.
So as a fellow writer and author, I really appreciate your authenticity and just the common themes that come through in friendship, evolution, just trees are something that I also write about, letting go, grief and love. I just really was drawn to all of your reading.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. I found myself writing around those themes a lot, especially during the lockdowns. So my first book centers kind of anger and sorrow a lot, because it's about a lot of it is about the history of the comfort women, which is a euphemistic term for the sex slaves of the Japanese Empire in the Second World War. So the nucleus of that book was the women's history and their voices, and so I was angry a lot of the times, which I think is useful. I think anger allows a lot of clarity to rise out. Like I'm angry now, like today, about politics, but I think that gives me an extreme clarity on how we should move forward. But for this book, I really wanted to think about tenderness, especially as we were all alone during the lockdowns, and I was so far away from my friends and my family, and I think writing about them, or writing about those emotions in a way, helped me be in a same kind of spiritual space with them, in my mind anyway. So I think it's kind of naturally, those themes naturally congregated in here.
I think it is a very spiritual experience.
Yeah, and I love reading my friends' poems. I wonder if some of you are, writers, and you write together or share poems together. I think it's a really special way of seeing, because we're so vulnerable in our writing, and sometimes some secrets come out in my poems that I would never utter, in real life. And to share that with somebody else, I feel like it's such a profound act of generosity. And so in that time, I was reading a lot of my friends' poems, and that made me feel very intimate with them, even though we couldn't be together physically. Yes. Yeah, my approach to writing, that's a really good question. I received that question recently, and I was like, oh God, I don't know. But I think generally for me, reading a lot is the most inspirational. So like I was saying earlier, reading other people's poems and going to readings like this, or spaces in which we just sit together to think about poetry or read and write together, that's the most inspirational to me, because I think community matters a lot to me as a writer. Some people are very solitary. For me, that's really not the case. So I love reading, beautiful poems and being reminded, no, this is why I started to write, right? Because I wanted to create that kind of beauty, that I wanted to exist in writing with this person. So that's usually what I do to start writing, kind of return to those poems that really made me want to be a writer. And in terms of revising, I like to revise as I write a lot. So as I'm, writing a draft, I would, delete things all the time. So it's just like one chunk of time in which I'm writing and revising simultaneously. But then I find that if I do that for too long, there's a point when you realize, okay, you don't even know if it's good anymore because you've looked at it for so long. So I think at that point, it's important for me to just kind of step back and come back to it with fresh eyes and figure out what was like the result of overthinking and what was the result of good judgment.
Yes. I guess it was kind of like tagged onto Tara's about the languages, right? Because, you have poems about being here and our proximity to whiteness and how that gives us an advantage. If you wrote in Korean, would you have different subjects or different take on that?
If I were to write in Korean, would I have different subjects or maybe other topics? Yeah, it's hard to say. Recently I had to write poems in Korean for 2 Korean magazines. And actually I wrote them first in English and then I translated them back into Korean, and they changed a lot, Translation is really requires a lot of editing actually, right? It's over revision in a sense. And I realized that, some of the things like writing about the diaspora, for instance, or being a transplant in Hawaii, maybe wasn't quite legible in Korean just because it's just not part of the popular imaginary in Korea. So there has to be some tweaks as I translate to make it make more sense in Korean. But yeah, I don't know. I usually don't start writing fresh poems in Korean just because I'm so used to writing in English, and I think it's, just because you speak a language doesn't mean you can write poetry in it. And I realized it through just trying to write poems first in Korean. I write essays in Korean, I read in Korean, I speak Korean, but just the rhythm is not something that I was comfortable with yet, right? And because I went through an MFA program in the United States, all of my creative writing classes were in English. All of my friends, well, not all, most of my friends were writing in English. So I think I got so used to that kind of context. So that's something I want to practice a lot more, writing in Korean, coming up with a draft that I'm really proud of, something that I think is similar in quality with my English language drafts. But yeah, I'm not sure about topics necessarily. I think they would be the same. Yeah. Yes.
What language do you dream in? Does it go back and forth, or do you have one language that's predominant when you're dreaming?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's something my mom would ask me a lot as I was growing up, when I became fluent in English. Yeah, I think it depends. Sometimes, you wake up and you you like remember certain things happening, but you don't remember the exact words, right? So maybe sometimes I wake up and just don't even register that the person in the dream is speaking in Korean or English. But I think it just depends on who's in the dream, right? If my grandmother's in it, she'll probably be speaking Korean. Yeah, I think it's both, yeah. But I'm interested in that too. I wish I could remember my dreams really clearly. Yeah.
So I've heard people mention themes that differ in literature between European languages. Have you noticed the same in like poetry or literature between Korean and
Yeah, like different themes across like Korean, contemporary Korean poetry, contemporary US poetry. You know, what I noticed reading Korean poems like being written right now is that not a lot of them are explicitly political or about current events in the same way that the US contemporary poetry is. And I'm careful about saying this because I'm much more well-read in contemporary US poetry than Korean poetry. But at least the books that I pick up and the books that my friends are talking about in South Korea, a lot of them are kind of internal exploration, you know, like kind of meditating on your personal emotions. Whereas in the US, I feel like a lot of my peers are writing about very specific events and like naming them. You know, like I have a poem that has like Trump in it, right? So that's one difference that I noticed, and I'm not sure why, but it's also not to say that in South Korea they're like apolitical, right? Like, you know, a poem can be political in terms of form, right? Like avant-garde poetics has a place in the world, and they're resisting against something, right? But I feel like it's just not as ideologically overt in the diction, but that's my observation. Don't spread it, you know. Maybe other people will disagree. And you know, a lot of poetry, South Korean poetry from like the 70s and 80s were extremely ideologically clear. You know, a lot about like the labor movements, democracy. So it's just, I think maybe just a shift in, you know, generation and trends. And maybe we'll go towards something that's more explicit in Korea as well. Oh, yeah.
I saw that there was like a crow on like a cover.
Oh, yeah.
Is that a creature that you're talking about?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I don't know. So I actually really didn't like this image when my publisher presented it to me because it kind of looks like a meme. Like, I don't know, I feel like the crow is just, you know, like a suspicious bird meme? You know, when they're kind of like squinting or side-eyeing you? And I was like, I can't have this on my cover, it's just too funny, you know? And like, but they were like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. But ultimately, you know, it's a long story, but ultimately we decided on this, and it really grew on me, actually, because I wanted this book cover to be a sister to my first book cover, which also has faces on it. Oh yeah, so Susan has it over there. There's like a, you know, that's actually from a thread art, but you know, like very simple lines. So I think they are in conversation, these two covers, so I like them. And I don't know, maybe they chose this with the bird because I have some birds in the book. Like the first poem I read about birds of America, you know, exhibit on the birder Audubon's paintings. So yeah, I don't know, poets love birds, so maybe they're probably like, why not? This probably will fit.
It's very eye-catching.
Yeah? Yeah, thank you. Some of my friends have like sent me pictures where they have like a stuffed bird and they like recreate the picture. Yeah. So I guess it's time.
We can continue this conversation upstairs. You know, there's some light refreshments in the hallway between the hub and the library. And Emily also has some copies of her books, just this one, right?
Yeah, just find me.
Yeah, and so yeah, if we'll have a book signing and refreshments upstairs, so I hope you can join us up there.
Oh, can I say, if the library has a copy of this book, I really am a big proponent of libraries, and I don't want you to feel obligated to buy my copy. Use your library and tell your public libraries to carry it if you want to read it. Don't want to buy it.
I ordered it, but it didn't come in. Yeah, so thank you for mentioning that. So it'll be in our Wynwood library.
Thank you.
Yeah.